I helped Sophia build her empire, gave up everything. And on the day of her wedding, she looked me in the eyes and said, "It's time we part ways." Professionally, Mom, after everything I sacrificed, this was how she repaid me. But what she doesn't know, the real game is just beginning. She's about to learn what happens when you throw away the one person who made you. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and join us where betrayal, drama, and hidden truths unfold. Also, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I was standing in the back of the room, alone, watching her, my daughter, my blood, the reason I had given up everything. As she stood at the altar, she was glowing, radiant, the perfect image of the woman she had become. It should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I should have felt pride, joy, relief. Instead, I felt nothing but an overwhelming, suffocating weight pressing on my chest. The vows were being exchanged, but the words barely reached my ears. I couldn't hear them over the pounding in my heart, the bitter taste of betrayal that had taken root in my mouth. For the last 11 years, I had poured my entire soul into this moment, not just her wedding, but the success she was about to experience. The business, the empire, I had built it for her. I had sacrificed my own career, my own dreams, my own life to help her succeed. Everything she had, the opportunities, the clients, the fame, it had been made possible because of the countless hours I had given, because of the blood, sweat, and tears I had poured into her dreams. But in that moment, all I felt was hollow. She was no longer the little girl I had raised. She wasn't the daughter who needed me anymore. She was standing there with him, a stranger, making promises to him that I had once thought would be mine. Promises of loyalty, of devotion, promises I had kept for her all these years. Then, as if the air had gone still and the room had gone silent, it happened. She turned toward me. Her eyes locked with mine, and in that instant, everything around me disappeared. The guests, the decorations, the smiles, they faded into nothing. And then, with a voice that carried across the room, she said, "Mom, I think it's time we part ways professionally. You've done enough." I felt the world fall away from beneath me. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. It wasn't just that she was firing me, not just that she was pushing me out of her business. It was that she was severing the last thread that had connected us. It wasn't a professional separation. It was a personal betrayal. How could she do this to me? After everything I had sacrificed, after everything I had given up, how could she look at me and say that? How could she turn her back on me, the woman who had built her business from the ground up, who had been there when she struggled, who had been there when she wanted to quit? How could she so easily toss me aside, like an old discarded coat? I could feel the blood draining from my face, my hands trembling at my sides. The tears I hadn't yet allowed to form threatened to spill over, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now, not in front of all these people. The guests, her friends, her new husband, they all smiled at her, congratulating her, praising her. They had no idea what had just happened. They had no idea that I had just been ripped apart from the inside. She had chosen him over me, and in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. I turned and walked out of that ballroom, the weight of her betrayal dragging me down with each step. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away. I needed to be alone. I needed to breathe. I found a quiet corner in the hallway, away from the noise, away from the people who couldn't possibly understand. And as I leaned against the cold wall, I let the anger wash over me, filling the empty space inside me. Anger at her, anger at myself for not seeing this coming, anger at the years I had wasted building something for her, only to be discarded so easily. And then, just like that, a thought hit me, cold and sharp. She would pay for this. She would feel what it was like to be abandoned by the one person who had always been there for her. She would understand the price of betrayal. I had sacrificed everything for her, and now it was time for me to take something back, something she had stolen from me. This was not over. No, this was just the beginning. I had spent so much time trying to keep the pain at bay, convincing myself that it was just a fluke, that maybe, just maybe, she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But deep down I knew she had been pulling away for months, perhaps even years. Looking back, I could see the signs, but I refused to see them for what they were. Every time I offered a suggestion, she'd dismiss it. Every time I tried to give my opinion, she'd cut me off. At first it seemed like she was just becoming more independent. I told myself it was natural. She was growing. She was becoming her own person. But now I realized that it wasn't growth I was witnessing. It was a separation, a severing of ties, little by little, until that moment, the moment she told me, so casually, that my work was no longer needed. The days following her wedding were the hardest. She tried to reach out, calling me several times, sending texts, leaving voicemails. I ignored every single one. What was there to say? Congratulations, dear, for leaving me behind. Thank you for firing me in front of your guests. No, I couldn't do it. Instead, I spent my days alone in the house we had once shared. It felt empty now, like a shell of what it used to be. The photos of her as a child, the ones we had proudly displayed around the house, now mocked me. She was no longer that little girl in the picture, the one who had needed me, the one who had looked to me for guidance, for comfort, for everything. I had given up my life for her. When her business started taking off, I put mine on hold. I sacrificed time with friends, family, my own passions, just to be there for her. She was my world, my everything. I had worked endlessly, behind the scenes, building her business into something she could be proud of. When we first started, there was no team, no investors, just me and her, figuring it out as we went along. I had watched her grow from someone unsure of her potential to a woman who ran the company with confidence. I had taught her everything I knew about the business world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But as the years passed, things changed. It started off subtly. I noticed how she began to make decisions without consulting me. She didn't need my advice anymore, she said. I'm doing fine on my own, she'd tell me. And I'd swallow the bitter truth that maybe I wasn't as important to her as I once was. When the business began to grow, I was there for every milestone. I helped build the network of contacts she had, introduced her to clients, and worked long hours alongside her, writing emails, handling paperwork, managing the behind-the-scenes details. I thought we were partners in this and that was enough. But it wasn't. It wasn't enough for her. And that day, on her wedding day, when she fired me without even blinking, I realized how much I had given up, and how little I had received in return. I hadn't just been her business partner, I had been her mother, and somehow she had forgotten that. Or worse, she had chosen to forget. But what hurt more than anything was how easily she had made that decision. I wasn't just a casualty of her growth, I was disposable. Her wedding day, the one day I had hoped to feel joy and pride, had instead marked the beginning of my reckoning. I wasn't going to stand by and let this go. I had every right to feel angry. I had every right to feel betrayed. But more than anything, I had the right to make her understand what she had done. The damage she had caused was deep, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't go back to work, couldn't look at the business without feeling like it was a mockery of everything I had done. The emails, the meetings, the constant stream of messages from her colleagues, it all felt like a joke now. It wasn't just about the business, it was about everything that had been built between us, everything that we had shared, that now seemed so fragile, so easily destroyed. The love between us had been replaced by something colder, something more businesslike. And that, more than anything, hurt the most. But I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with this. I needed to take control again. I needed to reclaim my place. She couldn't just throw me away. Not after all I had done. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that I had one thing she didn't. I had been in this world longer than she had. I had made sacrifices for her future, and now I was going to make her understand that I couldn't be dismissed so easily. The moment I decided to act, something inside me shifted. The pain, the anger, the sadness, They all fused together into something else: determination. I wasn't going to let her walk away from me without consequences. She wanted to cut me out of her life. Fine, I would make sure that she understood what that truly meant. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The weeks that followed her wedding were a blur, a mix of silence, phone calls I refused to answer, and a constant gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the hurt of being rejected, or even the anger at how she had tossed me aside so easily. It was the realization that the relationship we had, the connection I thought was unbreakable, was no longer there. The bond that had been built over years of shared sacrifice, hard work and love, was shattered, and in its place was something far colder. I had spent years thinking that our lives were entwined, that our futures were bound together. After all, she was my daughter. But she was no longer the little girl who needed me. She had grown into someone who not only didn't need me, but didn't want. It was almost a relief to not have to see her anymore, but the void she left behind in me and my life was unbearable. There were times when I found myself pacing the house, picking up the phone to call her, but then stopping myself. What would I even say? Congratulations, dear, on the best decision you've ever made. Abandoning your mother. I knew in my heart that I was right to be angry. I had every right to feel betrayed. I had every right to demand an explanation, to ask her why she had chosen him over me. I had every right to make her see the weight of what she had done. But in the silence of those days, I also knew that a part of me was lost. I had given so much of myself to her, but there was no acknowledgement, no appreciation, no understanding of what I had sacrificed. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to understand what she had taken for granted. And as the days dragged on, something dark began to grow inside me. I wanted revenge, not just for what she had done, but for the years I had spent believing that what we had was something real, something worth protecting. I wasn't sure what shape my revenge would take, but I knew it had to be something that would make her regret the way she had treated me. I didn't want to hurt her. Not really. I just wanted her to understand the cost of her action. I wanted her to see that what she had done wasn't something small, something she could brush aside like a misunderstanding. And as the days passed, the idea began to form. I would hit her where it would hurt the most. The business, the one thing she cared about more than any, the one thing she had always relied on me for. I would take what I had helped her build, piece by piece, until she could no longer ignore the truth. The decision wasn't easy. It was a heavy, painful one. The woman inside me, the mother who loved her daughter more than anything, recoiled at the thought of betraying her. But the woman who had been abandoned, who had been treated like a disposable asset, was rising. That woman was cold, calculating and relentless. It was time to act. I began to study her business more closely, researching every move, every decision. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was a strategist, a force that was going to make her see the consequences of what she had done. And as I dug deeper, I realized just how much power I still had. I had contacts in the industry, people who knew me, people who had been around long before she started making her name. I had the experience, I had the know-how, and she had no idea how much of her success was built on my shoulder. It wasn't just about the work I had put in, it was about the leverage I still had, the secrets I had kept, the knowledge of the company's weaknesses that she had no idea existed. And just like that, I began to plan. I wasn't going to tear everything down at once. No, I was smarter than that. I would take my time, let her feel the pressure, let her see the cracks in her empire, and watch as it slowly began to crumble. Every day, I made calls. I reached out to old contacts, those who owed me favors, those who had watched me work behind the scenes. I planted seeds. The whispers started. Whispers of doubt, whispers of potential financial troubles, whispers of mistakes I had helped cover up, the things she didn't know, the things I had kept hidden for her. It wasn't long before I could see the impact of my efforts. I watched as she grew more and more tense. I watched as the pressure started to build. She had become so used to me handling everything, so used to having me take care of the details, that without me everything started to unravel. She called me several times, but I didn't answer. She left voicemail after voicemail, asking for a meeting, asking for help. She couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew she was realizing, slowly but surely, that I had been the backbone of everything she had built. And now, Without me, she was left to deal with the consequences of her actions. It wasn't enough yet, not for me, but with each passing day, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that, in time, she would come to understand the true cost of betrayal. I wasn't doing this because I wanted to destroy her. No. I was doing it to make her see that what she had done to me was not something that could be fixed with a simple apology. It was a lesson she had to learn, one that would leave a mark on her. And when the day came, when she finally came to me, begging for my help, I would be ready. She would learn that no one, no matter how much they think they've grown, no matter how successful they become, could ever afford to forget the people who helped them get there. The silence in the room was deafening. My breath seemed to echo off the walls, each exhale a slow, deliberate reminder of the weight of the decision I had made. She had underestimated me. She had forgotten who I was, who I had been to her. But that was about to change. I could feel it, deep within me. I walked over to the window, the cool evening breeze brushing against my skin. It was as though the world outside had taken on a different hue. Everything was sharper, more vivid. The trees outside, their leaves swaying gently in the wind, seemed to echo my internal turmoil. I had spent too long giving her everything, burying my own needs beneath her expectations, beneath her success. I had sacrificed myself, my happiness, all for her. And now, with every passing moment, I realized that I was the one who had to reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. I had helped her rise. I had been the foundation beneath her, the steady hands that had built every brick of the empire she now controlled. I had given her my strength, my time, my heart, but she had never once seen the cost of it all. She had grown, yes, but at what price? I could still hear the words she had said to me that day, so cold, so fine, the way she'd dismissed me like I was just another cog in her machine, easily replaced. I think it's time we part ways, professionally, Mom. Those words, they cut through me like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. And now, here I was, standing alone, knowing that everything I had given her had been taken for granted. I had always told myself that I was doing it out of love, out of duty, but now, I realized that it had been more than that. It had been my identity, my entire existence, wrapped up in her. And she had discarded me. She would learn, though, she would learn, that no matter how successful she became, no matter how much she thought she had grown, she could never afford to forget the ones who helped her get there. I felt a fire stir inside me, not the kind of fire that burns recklessly, but the kind that simmers, steady and unrelenting. I wasn't going to let her continue like this, walking through life, thinking she could just throw people away. She had to know the weight of what she had done. I reached for my phone, the cold surface grounding me, reminding me that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of anger. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something irreversible. I could feel it in my bones. The tide was turning. I had no more patience for pretending, no more time for being overlooked. I sent the email, simple, direct. I didn't need to say much more than what was necessary. Business partnerships. I believe it's time we restructured things. I'll be in touch. I put the phone down, the action far more decisive than any words could express. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't asking for anything. I was taking control. A part of me wanted to feel guilty, wanted to tell myself I was wrong for doing this, that I was hurting her, that I should show mercy. But then I thought of everything I had given up, all the nights I had stayed up late, the sacrifices I had made, the moments I had missed in my own life just to make sure she had everything she needed. Her business was nothing without me. She would see that soon enough. I wasn't going to let her forget that. The clock ticked in the background, steady and unrelenting. As the weight of my decision settled in, I didn't feel remorse. I didn't feel regret. What I felt was something new, something strong. I was done being the person she could walk over. I was done being invisible in her life. The game had changed, yes, and I was finally ready to play. But this time, I wasn't going to play by her rules. This time, I would set the terms. I took a long, steady breath, letting the air fill my lungs, and as I exhaled, I realized something. She would learn. She would learn what happens when you take the ones who care for you the most for granted. And when she did, when the weight of her mistakes finally caught up with her, I would be the one standing tall ready to help her rebuild, but only if she truly understood, only if she could feel the weight of her own decisions. Until then, the silence would be my ally, the tension in the air would be the reminder. She would know who had made her who she was, and when she came to face the consequences, I would be there, stronger than before, and ready to reclaim what was mine. It started with a phone call. For weeks I had watched from the sidelines as my daughter's world slowly began to crumble under the weight of her decisions. The cracks in her business were no longer subtle. Clients started pulling out, deals fell through, employees became disillusioned, and I had a front row seat to the chaos I had carefully set in motion. She called me that evening after a particularly disastrous meeting with one of her major investors. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the fear that she was losing control of everything. "Mom, I need you," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, I don't know what's happening, everything's falling apart. Can we talk? Can you come over?" I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, savoring the feeling of power I had over her in that instant. For years I had been the one running to fix her problems, to ease her fears, to make everything right. But now, the roles had reversed. Now she was the one begging. "I'm sorry, honey," I said, letting my voice drip with a coldness that wasn't entirely planned. "I don't think I can help you anymore." Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I knew she had expected a different response, perhaps the mother she thought she could always rely on, the mother who would come rushing to the rescue. But I had learned a long time ago that this wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about me being her safety net, or her constant companion in business. It was about me making her face the consequences of her actions. She tried to explain, tried to make excuses, but I had heard enough, I had seen enough, and somewhere deep down, I knew that this was the moment of truth, the moment where everything shifted, where the revenge I had been planning for weeks would finally take shape. "You've hurt me more than you'll ever know," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the desperation in hers. "I helped you build this empire, and now you've thrown me away. You made a choice, and now you have to deal with the aftermath." She pleaded with me, but I hung up the phone, not out of anger but because I knew it was time for her to understand the full weight of what she had done. The next few days were a whirlwind. She kept calling, showing up at my house, leaving messages. She was frantic, but I remained firm, refusing to soften the blow. She had made her choice, and now she had to feel the consequences. But something in me began to shift, just as it had when I first decided to take action. This wasn't just about making her understand her mistake, it was about regaining the control I had lost when I put her before everything else in my life. I had given up too much, sacrificed too much, and I would not let her trample over me like this, no matter how painful it was. As the days turned into weeks, I started to realize something else. She wasn't just losing control of her business, she was losing control of her life, and now she was seeing the truth of what she had done. She had underestimated me. She had thought I was nothing more than a tool to help her get what she wanted. But I wasn't just that. I was her foundation, her mentor, her guide, and without me, everything was unraveling. It was hard to watch, but it was also deeply satisfying. I wasn't an innocent victim in this story. I had helped create this mess. I had let myself be used, pushed aside, and forgotten. But no more. Now the time for action had come. I started making my move. I reached out to the contacts I had cultivated over the years, the ones who had once trusted me, who had seen what I had done for her, and who knew the real story. I wasn't just trying to sabotage her business, I was making sure she learned the price of her betrayal. I had heard her complain so many times about how she didn't need me anymore, how she had learned everything she needed to learn and could handle it all on her own. Well, now she would see just how little she knew. She would see how fragile her world was without the woman who had been holding it all together. I began planting seeds of doubt in the same people she had relied on. I spoke to clients, to suppliers, to business partners, letting them know that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. I dropped hints about how the numbers didn't add up, how deals were falling through, how the foundation was shaky. I didn't need to do much. She had already made her mistakes. I was just the one to make sure the world saw them. The first major hit came when a large investor backed out, citing issues with leadership and financial uncertainty. The fallout was immediate. The headlines began to change. Where once her company had been a beacon of success, now it was struggling to maintain its footing. And still, she couldn't understand what was happening. She was blaming others, blaming the market, blaming bad luck, but she couldn't see that it was her own arrogance that had caused this. She had ignored the person who had made her what she was, the person who had kept everything running smoothly. And that's when it became clear to me, I had made the right decision. I had taken control back. I had let her see the harsh reality of what it was like to be alone in this world, alone, without me. I was just getting started. The consequences were only beginning to hit. I could feel the air shifting around me. A strange sense of calm washed over me, but it wasn't peaceful. It was more like the calm before a storm, the quiet before the fury. I had made my move. I had set everything in motion, and now it was only a matter of time before everything fell into place. There was no turning back. I hadn't realized how much the anger had consumed me until it started to subside, leaving something else behind, something far more dangerous. There was no joy in what I had done, no victory, only the knowledge that in time, she would feel the weight of her actions, and the realization that I had been right all along. The silence in my apartment was deafening. The tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, it all sounded so loud, so invasive. My thoughts swirled in my mind, faster now, each one building on the next, until they consumed me entirely. I was done being a passive participant in my own life, done letting others dictate my worth. She had thought she could discard me, but I was still here. I was still standing. The decisions I had made weren't just for me, not anymore. I had a purpose now, a mission if you will. To make her realize the cost of her choices, to make her understand that no one, no matter how successful, no matter how much they thought they had grown, could afford to forget the people who helped them get there. I felt a sense of anticipation rising inside me, like something was brewing just beneath the surface. She had been so confident, so assured in her own power, and yet she had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that I had been watching, waiting for this very moment. The consequences were only beginning to hit, and as they did, the guilt I had been carrying began to melt away. What had I sacrificed for her? What had I given up to make sure she succeeded? I had built her world. I had given everything and she had thrown it away. I didn't owe her an apology for what I was about to do. The game had changed. It had to. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair, the cold wood pressing against my spine, grounding me. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the one that had once been full of gratitude, full of love. Now it was empty, hollow. The woman who once looked to me for everything now only saw me as a tool, something to be used, discarded when no longer needed. But I wasn't going to let her forget. Not now, not ever. The phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it at first, feeling the weight of the moment wash over me. But then it buzzed again, and again. She was trying to reach me. I reached for the phone, my fingers trembling slightly, not from fear but from the strange power I felt, the power that was now mine, that I had taken back. The voice on the other end was shaky, desperate. Mom, please, I don't know what's happening. I need your help. You have to fix this. I can't do it without you. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before responding. The ache in my chest was familiar but it didn't move me. Not anymore. You didn't need me before, I said, my voice steady but cold. You made your choice. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. I was wrong. I didn't realize how much I needed you until it was too late. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I could hear the tears in her voice, the desperation, the fear, and yet, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the hurt, the betrayal. She thought that words could fix everything, that apologies could heal the wounds she had caused. But words didn't mean anything when actions spoke louder. I had built her, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not anymore. I'm done helping you, I said quietly, almost as if I were speaking to myself. This is your mess now. The silence that followed was deafening. It hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel her pain, her regret, but it wasn't enough to move me. Not anymore. I had to let her feel the weight of her choices. I had to let her understand what it meant to lose everything she had taken for granted. The consequences were just beginning to unfold, and she would have to face them. I hung up the phone, the finality of the action echoing in my mind. She would learn, she would feel the weight of her decisions, just as I had, but I would be ready for whatever came next, because I wasn't the woman I once was. I wasn't just the one who helped, the one who gave. I was the one who had taken back control, and I wasn't going to let go. The first wave of success had barely faded when the real storm hit. It was on a Wednesday morning, a quiet gray day, that mirrored the cloud of bitterness hanging over me. I had just finished reading the latest financial report on her company, when I felt a sudden, strange surge of satisfaction. The numbers weren't just bad, they were disastrous. The cracks I had planted in her world were now fractures, breaking apart. I had anticipated this moment, but it still felt surreal. To see everything I had warned her about come crashing down, to know I was the reason it all started, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I leaned back in my chair, the file in my hands feeling heavier than it should have. The emails, the calls I had made, they were all starting to bear fruit. My daughter, so accustomed to getting everything right, was now facing the harsh reality of her arrogance and neglect. Her world was collapsing, and I was watching it happen from the sidelines. She didn't know it yet, but the entire structure she had relied on was crumbling. The first revelation came when one of her major investors pulled out. They cited serious concerns about leadership. A few days later, a supply chain issue escalated to a crisis. Her trusted partners started questioning her decision-making, the very thing she had taken pride in. The phone call I had received that morning only solidified everything I had been planning. It was one of her former employees, someone who had worked closely with her, someone who had left her company for a better opportunity. The voice on the other end was quiet, almost too calm. "I don't know if you're aware, but there's talk of a buyout," she said. "The board is getting restless. Your daughter's not the same leader she once was. She's lost control." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I had no idea what to say. I didn't know. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. She's not running things the way you used to. I'm sorry, but this is bigger than her now, and I know you had a lot to do with it." I had kept my role in her downfall under the radar, but there were others who noticed. My hand in the unraveling of her success was becoming undeniable. She had fired me, yes, but what she hadn't known was that I wasn't done. I hadn't planned to go this far, but it was too late to stop now. She had turned her back on me. She had humiliated me in front of all those people. She had taken everything I had built for her and cast it aside like I was nothing. I needed to make her understand that there was a price to pay for that. By the time she called me again, I had made my decision. "Mom, I don't know what's going on," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I need your help, please." I could hear the panic rising in her words. The once confident, self-assured woman was now unraveling, and there was something deeply satisfying about hearing her this way. She hadn't wanted my help before. She had refused it, rejected me, but now she was begging. I let the silence linger before I responded. "Do you know how many times I tried to warn you? Do you know how many times I gave up my own life, my own career, my own dreams, just to help you succeed? And now, when it's all falling apart, you come to me asking for my help." Her voice cracked. "Mom, please, I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize," I repeated, the words like acid on my tongue. "You didn't realize what you were doing to me? You didn't realize that I was the one who built this? You think you can just throw me away, and walk away like nothing happened? No, that's not how this works." I could hear her breathing sharply on the other end of the line. She was trying to hold it together, but I could hear the tears in her voice. For a moment, I felt a brief flicker of regret, but then I reminded myself, she had done this to herself. "I've already done what I could," I said coldly. "The damage is done." I hung up before she could say another word. It wasn't easy. I wasn't sure what had come over me. A part of me had hoped she would realize what she had lost, but that wasn't enough anymore. She needed to feel the full weight of what she had done. She needed to understand that she couldn't just discard people who had given everything to her. But something was different now. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was her reckoning. As the days passed, things began to accelerate. Her team, once full of loyalty, was now unraveling. Her employees were starting to leave. The once thriving office was filled with whispers and discontent. Investors were becoming wary, and without the foundation I had built for her, everything was slowly slipping through her fingers. I watched it all unfold, knowing that I had orchestrated this from the shadows. It wasn't just about her business. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about something deeper, the loss of trust, the loss of love, the loss of everything that had made us family. And yet, I felt no guilt. No, this was her doing. She had chosen this path. But then, something unexpected happened. One of her longtime partners, someone who had been with her from the beginning, came to me with a proposition. "She needs you," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "The board is considering a buyout. There's no way she can stop it. She's lost control, but you still have influence. You could help her." I could almost hear the pity in his voice. He didn't understand. "I don't think I can help her anymore," I replied quietly, though the words felt more final than I had intended. But the seed of doubt was planted. I could feel it swirling in my chest. Was I really done? Was I really going to watch her destroy everything she had built? Or was this the moment for something else? A chance to reclaim my position, my place, in her world? I wasn't sure, but as the phone clicked off, one thing was certain: I would be the one to decide how this ended, and the end was coming. The phone clicked off. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with unanswered questions and a finality that felt like a door slamming shut. I sat there, holding the phone in my hand, staring at the screen as if waiting for it to light up again, for her name to appear, for her to beg, to cry, to do anything to make me reconsider. But it didn't. And just like that, the world I had known, the world that had revolved around her, it began to disappear. I wasn't sure what had just happened. My fingers still tingled from the call, the coldness of the words I had spoken hanging in the air between us. It felt like a dream, like I had said it all in another lifetime. And yet, deep down, there was an undeniable certainty that had settled into my bones, a truth that had become my own. I would be the one to decide how this ended. I looked around the room, as if the walls themselves might offer some insight, some guidance, but they remained silent. No one could tell me what to do. No one could give me the answers I sought. Not anymore. The path I had chosen was mine alone, and as I sat there, the gravity of that realization washed over me like a storm. Her cries, her desperate apologies, they felt distant now, like echoes from a life I no longer recognized. In the past, they would have moved me. They would have softened me, made me doubt my choices, made me wonder if forgiveness was within reach. But now, the only thing I could feel was this strange cold determination, the kind of resolve that made me realize I was no longer the woman who would give in, who would always soften at the sound of her voice. No, I had been too soft for too long. The anger still burned in me, but it was no longer the kind of rage that clouded my judgment. It was something else, something sharper, more calculated. I was done being the one who cleaned up after her mistakes. I was done being the one who took the weight of her decisions and carried it alone. This was her mess, her consequences, and now, she would see just how much I had given up for her, how much I had sacrificed to build the very world she now took for granted. The end was coming, and it wasn't going to be what she expected. I stood up, the floor creaking beneath my feet as if to remind me that even the smallest movements held weight now. I walked over to the window, the city skyline stretching out before me, indifferent to the storm brewing inside. The sun had set hours ago, but the sky still held traces of light, streaks of purple and pink fading into the inky blue of night. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to begin. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of everything that had led me here. The choices, the sacrifices, the pain. I wasn't just moving forward anymore. I was stepping into something bigger, something irreversible. She had fired me. She had cut me out of her life. But what she didn't understand was that I had already made my peace with that. And now, I would take back what was mine. I stepped away from the window, my thoughts clearer than ever. Every decision I had made, every step I had taken, had led me to this moment. And now, the only thing left to do was watch the consequences unfold. I walked to the desk, my hands steady, My mind focused, the papers on the desk, the files I had once carefully managed for her, now felt like nothing more than a symbol of what I had lost. But I wouldn't let myself linger on the past anymore. It was time to act. The emails were easy to send, the calls were easy to make. Every action I took was a carefully calculated move, a step closer to the end I had set in motion. She would learn, just as I had learned, that no one could rise to the top without looking back at the ones who had helped them get there. She would learn that betrayal came with consequences, and those consequences weren't something that could be undone with a simple apology. I could feel the weight of everything I had done settle in, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt liberating. Every action, every choice was mine now. I wasn't doing this for her anymore. I was doing this for me. And as the final email went out, the one that would change everything for her, I felt a shift inside me. A strange sense of peace began to settle in. I had reclaimed my power. I had taken control. The end was coming. But as I leaned back in the chair, my fingers still resting lightly on the keyboard, I realized something else. The real end wasn't going to be the consequences she faced. It was the moment I finally walked away from everything I had built for her, and from everything I had thought I was. The end wasn't about her success or her failure. It was about me. I was done being invisible, and the silence that followed, the silence of waiting for the fallout, was exactly what I had needed. I had chosen this path, and now for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe again. It had been nearly 3 months since everything began to unravel. The storm I had set in motion had reached its peak, and I watched from a distance as it all came crashing down. Her business was on the brink of collapse, and I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. She had made her choices and now she was paying the price. Yet somewhere deep down, there was a hollowness I couldn't shake. The bitterness had dulled into something colder, something that didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. I had gotten what I wanted, hadn't I? She had been humbled. She had been knocked down from the pedestal I had once put her on. The empire she had built, the empire I had helped build, was crumbling, and she was left picking up the pieces. But it didn't feel like justice anymore. It felt like something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. One evening, after a long day of reflecting on everything, I was sitting alone in the living room when the doorbell rang. I hadn't expected company, but when I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, standing there in the doorway, her eyes red from crying, her face drawn with exhaustion. I wanted to close the door. I wanted to turn away from her, to tell her to go back to the life she had chosen over me. But something stopped me. Something inside me broke at the sight of her. My little girl, now a woman, broken and lost. She had finally come to face the consequences of what she had done. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. I need you." I stood there, my hands still on the doorknob, my mind racing. The anger, the betrayal, everything that had driven me to this point, it was still there, burning inside me. But I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest, the part of me that still loved her, no matter what she had done to me. "You had your chance," I said, my voice quieter than I had intended. "You made your choices. You didn't need me then. You pushed me away. You fired me." Her face crumpled, and she took a step forward, her voice breaking. "I was wrong. I didn't realize what I didn't know how much I needed you until everything started falling apart. I don't know how to fix it. I can't do it without you." She was kneeling before me now, tears streaming down her face. I had never seen her like this. She was no longer the confident, independent woman I had once admired. She was a daughter, my daughter, who had come back, broken, asking for forgiveness. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the years, the pain, the anger. I wanted to say so much. I wanted to make her feel the sting of everything she had done. But as I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw the same little girl who had trusted me once, the girl who had needed me. And in that moment, all the anger, all the resentment I had carried for so long, began to dissolve. "You can't just expect me to fix this for you," I said, my voice steady, though the emotion inside me threatened to break through. "You don't get to push me away for so long and then come back expecting me to clean up the mess." "I know," she whispered, her voice so small now. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you, Mom. I need you more than I ever did before. For a moment we stood there, in silence. I wasn't sure what to do. The past had been so much pain, so much anger, but when I looked at her, I saw a flicker of something else. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, we could begin again. You've made a mess of things, sweetheart, I said, my voice softening, and you have to learn to clean it up, but I'll be here to help you. I always will. Her shoulders shook as she collapsed into my arms, sobbing, and for the first time in months, I let myself hold her, letting go of all the hurt, all the resentment. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, just holding each other, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. The days that followed were not easy. It took time, patience, and a lot of hard conversations, but we began to rebuild. Her business didn't recover overnight, and neither did our relationship. There were moments when the pain threatened to resurface, when the old wounds opened up again, but I had come to understand that healing wasn't something that could happen all at once. It had to come in small steps, in moments of vulnerability, and facing the truth of what had happened. I didn't forgive her all at once, and she didn't expect me to, but over time, we began to rebuild the foundation that had been destroyed. As we worked together again, this time not just as business partners, but as mother and daughter, I realized that maybe revenge hadn't been the answer after all. Maybe, what we both needed was to heal, to move past the hurt, to rebuild what we had lost. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I could see a way forward. I wasn't sure what the future held for me or for us, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to take the next step, whatever it was. And when I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, I saw someone who had learned from her mistakes, someone who had grown, someone who would never take me for granted again. And that in the end, was enough. In the end, I realized something I never wanted to admit. Revenge didn't give me the peace I thought it would. Sophia may have discarded me, but I learned that no one can ever take away the power we hold to reclaim our lives, our dignity. I may have been broken, but I'm stronger now, and I'm ready to live for me. My name is Emma, and this was my story. Here at RL's Circle, your story matters too. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you in the worst way possible? Would you take them back, or would you let them face the consequences? Let me know in the comments below. I'm dying to hear your thoughts.